Welcome to SEDF 704, Diversity in Adolescent Development. In this video, we'll explore how emotional systems shape the adolescent experience and how these processes intersect with diverse factors like race, gender, culture, ability, language, and environment. Adolescence is a time of profound transformation, not just about how young people think, but how they feel and respond to the world around them. Emotional intensity often surges, shaping everything from friendships to academic motivation. We'll begin by looking at the biology of emotion and how the brain and body work together to create these feelings and reactions that define adolescence. We'll also consider how these emotional experiences are shaped by evolutionary forces, social learning, and attachment patterns, highlighting the dynamic interplay of nature and nurture. Next, we'll explore major theories of emotion like James Lang, Cannon-Bard, Shasta-Singer, and Ekman, each offering a different perspective of how adolescents move from a stimulus to a physical reaction, a mental interpretation, and an emotional experience. Finally, we'll look at how gender, sexual orientation, and other dimensions of diversity influence how emotions are expressed, perceived, and supported during this period of growth. Understanding these emotional processes can help us create more empathetic, responsive learning environments where every adolescent can feel seen and supported. Let's start with the basics. What are emotions? Emotions are complex, automatic responses that involve three parts: how we feel inside, like joy or anger, what happens to our bodies, like a racing heart, and how we act on the outside, like laughing, crying, or pulling away. They're the way our minds and bodies work together to react to the environment. We also need to distinguish emotions from feelings. Emotions are immediate, universal, and automatic. They're hardwired responses that help humans survive. Feelings, on the other hand, are personal, conscious experience of those emotions. They're shaped by our thoughts, beliefs, and our past experiences, and can look different from person to person and culture to culture. This idea connects to the bigger debate we've seen throughout this course: nature versus nurture. Nature is the biological blueprint, our genetic wiring, and nurture is everything we experience, our culture, language, family, and environment. Both of them work together to shape how we feel, think, and act. Let's begin by describing how the brain itself is experiencing emotion and feelings. The amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, reacts first. When we feel threatened, excited, or overwhelmed, it fires off a rapid signal that triggers a cascade of changes in the body. In adolescence, this system is extra sensitive, meaning emotions feel more intense and are harder to regulate because the alarm bell is ringing louder and faster. Why is this especially difficult during adolescence? Well, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps us slow down, think logically, and control impulses, is still under construction. It's like trying to drive a car with a supercharged gas pedal, but brakes that are still being built. That's why teens can go from calm to upset in an instant, and why it's harder for them to pump the brakes in emotional situations. Further, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is a major neuroendocrine system that regulates stress responses and various bodily functions, including metabolism, immune responses, mood, and energy storage. It sends signals to the adrenal glands to release stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. So if a teen sees a teacher slam a book down in frustration, their heart might start pounding and they feel jumping, even if the situation isn't truly dangerous. Or if they're about to go on stage for a performance, that same stress system might make them feel super jittery or nervous. If, on the other hand, the emotion is rewarding, like winning a soccer game or getting a compliment from someone they like, the brain releases dopamine. Dopamine acts like a highlighter, making that moment stand out and feel even more important. It also reinforces the desire to do it again, like practicing even harder for the next game because it felt so good to win. Another powerful transmitter that is especially active during adolescence is oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone. Oxytocin deepens social connections and can make positive social experiences, like hanging out with friends or meeting your first crush, feel even more rewarding. But it also means social rejection and peer conflicts are felt even more painfully. So during adolescence, the combination of supercharged emotional system and an under construction rational system and powerful social bonding chemicals like oxytocin help explain why emotional highs and lows are so intense for them and why teens are still learning to find a balance. Emotions are powerful, helping us respond to the world around us, but they can also disrupt clear thinking and learning, especially during adolescence. Emotional interference, or EI, happens when strong feelings hijack attention, making it hard to concentrate or think logically. This is particularly challenging for adolescents because their amygdala is supercharged during this period, and their prefrontal cortex, which is still maturing, can't calm things down. When the amygdala is triggered, like by feeling excluded or doubted, it sends a flood of cortisol, the stress hormone, throughout the body. This stress response can override any logical thinking and block focus. Understanding the power of emotional tone helps us see that it's not just the presence of emotion that matters, it's which emotions are present, how they're shaped by identity and social context, and how they can either open doors to learning or close them. Positive emotions like joy, excitement, and curiosity can actually boost memory, creativity, and keep the drive going. Negative emotions like anxiety or frustration can do the opposite, blocking attention, working memory, and the self-regulation that's so crucial for learning. For adolescents, these emotional ups and downs are even more intense, as their brains are wired for heightened sensitivity, and that means that even small slights or doubts can feel huge, especially when tied to how they see themselves. For example, think of a girl in science class that may feel that her classmates underestimate her abilities just because she's a girl. This self-doubt and frustration can drown out her passion and preparation, making it hard to stay focused or speak up. Or a student questioning their sexual orientation might feel constant worry about how others see them. That stress can cloud their concentration and willingness to participate, even if they're capable and engaged. These emotional storms don't just shape feelings, they shape how adolescents learn, participate, and express themselves in the classroom. Bias, stigma, or even just fear of rejection can overshadow real strengths and insights. As educators, we can create classrooms that treat gender and sexual diversity as normal and valued. Using inclusive language, challenging stereotypes, and showing real support can calm these emotional storms, letting every adolescent feel seen, safe, and ready to learn. While we often think of emotions as being uniquely human, they're not. In fact, emotional expressions and experiences have been observed in many other mammals. A powerful example of this is Coco the gorilla. Coco the gorilla, known for her use of American Sign Language, became famous for her deep affection for kittens. In the 1980s, Coco adopted a tiny gray kitten she named All Ball and treated it like her own baby, gently cuddling it and even signing cat and baby together. Unfortunately, All Ball died in an accident and Coco visibly mourned, signing words like sad and cry repeatedly. This moment demonstrates that emotional bonds and capacity for grief are not just human experiences, but they can be deeply felt by other mammals too. I'll leave the link to Coco's story in the description box below. These observations inspired researchers like Jack Panksepp to study the emotional brain in animals more systematically. Panksepp conducted experiments with mice and other mammals, observing how specific areas of the brain responded to different emotional triggers. For example, he measured vocalizations in rats, high-pitched chirping sounds that seemed to indicate playfulness and laughter-like states. Through this work, Panksepp identified 7 primary emotional systems, core emotional pathways that all mammals share. These are seeking, the drive to explore and pursue goals like curiosity or anticipation; rage, the reaction to frustration or obstacles like aggression or anger; fear, the instinct to avoid danger or threat like freezing or fleeing; lust, the drive for sexual attraction and mating behavior. Care, the instinct to nurture and protect others, especially young. Panic or grief, the response to separation and social loss, like crying or calling out. And play, the joyful exploration of social and physical environments, like roughhousing or games. Panks have believed these primary emotional systems form in the biological foundation of our feelings. In terms of evolution, over time, as the human frontal cortex evolved from what we see in lower mammals, we gained the capacity for more complex emotional experiences like guilt, pride, or nostalgia. But even these second and third level emotions can be traced back to the original 7 core systems, and they express in the same places of the brain in a rat versus a human being. So while emotions became more nuanced in humans, they're deeply rooted in the ancient pathways we share with other mammals. Keeping with our theme of evolution, attachment also has real survival value. From an evolutionary perspective, forming strong emotional bonds helps ensure that infants stay close to their caregivers, boosting their chances of survival in dangerous or uncertain environments. John Bowlby was the first to fully articulate these ideas in what we now call attachment theory. Bowlby argued that children are born with an innate drive to form attachments because these relationships provide both physical protection and emotional security. He coined the term attachment to describe this deep, long-standing bond between a child and their caregiver. Attachment is more than just a feeling. It's a whole behavioral system designed to keep infants close to their caregivers. When children feel threatened or unsure, this system kicks in to bring them back to their safe space. A secure base is created when a caregiver's consistent presence gives the child the confidence to explore their world, knowing they can always return to their safe base for comfort and safety. We also know that oxytocin, the bonding hormone, plays a crucial role in this. When a caregiver and child share close physical contact, like holding, cuddling, or gentle touch, oxytocin floods their brains. This release builds trust and strengthens their connection, reinforcing that sense of security. But for a secure attachment to form, it's not just about physical closeness. Responsiveness matters. The caregiver has to be in tune with the child's physical, social, and emotional needs. Also, mutual enjoyment matters. The caregiver and child need to share positive reciprocal interactions that create warmth and safety. We see the power of these ideas in classic studies like Harry Harlow's experiments with baby monkeys. Harlow was inspired by Bowlby and often corresponded with him. In his studies, Harlow found that baby monkeys chose to spend time with a soft, comforting mother made of cloth rather than a wire mother that only offered food. This powerful finding showed that love and comfort are just as essential for normal human development as physical nourishment. Mary Ainsworth, a close collaborator of Bowlby, wanted to observe how babies and caregivers interact in real-world-like settings. She wondered if there were different types of attachment relationships and conducted the famous strange situation experiments, observing how infants react when separated from their caregiver and reunited. From these observations, she identified different attachment styles. The secure attachment is when the child feels safe to explore, knowing they can return to the caregiver for comfort and support. In the insecure avoidant attachment style, the child avoids the caregiver when stressed, showing little emotional connection. In the insecure resistant or ambivalent attachment, the child is clingy and uncertain, both of seeking and resisting comfort. Finally, in the disorganized attachment style, the child shows confusing and contradictory behavior. This is often linked to trauma or unpredictable caregiving. So how does this present in an adolescent? Secure adolescents are more likely to have strong peer relationships, confidence in asking for help, and persistence with difficult tasks. These are students who seem to bounce back and seek out connection when they are struggling. In contrast, Adolescents that exhibit the insecure, resistant, or anxious attachment style may be more socially sensitive, often worried about how others see them or fearing rejection, leading to social withdrawal or seeking constant reassurance. Teens who are experiencing insecure, avoidant attachment styles might be more likely to push others away, avoid group work, or act like they don't care, even when they're actually struggling with trust and belonging. Finally, students who have a disorganized attachment style, which is often linked to trauma, can make it hard for teens to form consistent patterns in relationships, leading to unpredictable and confusing social behavior. Here's a quick set of examples showing how gender can intersect with these attachment styles in adolescence. For secure attachment, a girl with secure attachment might confidently seek feedback from her female friends in a group project, knowing her relationships are based on trust and respect. For insecure, resistant, or anxious attachment styles, a girl who feels anxious about her peer relationships might constantly worry about being excluded from the friend group, leading her to overcheck her texts and social media for signs of rejection. In an insecure, avoidant situation, a girl who learns that showing too much emotion is socially inappropriate might avoid sharing feelings even when she's struggling. In terms of disorganized attachment, a girl who has faced gender-based bullying or family rejection may show unpredictable social behavior, oscillating back and forth between seeking support and pushing people away. This reflects both trauma and the challenges of identity formation. Attachment isn't a static trait. It's a framework or internal working model for how we view relationships. Even though it's established in early childhood, it continues to evolve across the lifespan as new relationships and experiences add layers. In fact, adolescence is a time where old attachment patterns can be reactivated or even revised. Teens face new social challenges which cause attachment needs like safety, trust, and acceptance to become more complicated as teens navigate romantic relationships, peer dynamics, and identity exploration. The way families respond to these transitions can either reinforce old patterns, like a secure base that promotes independence, or create new anxieties, like rejection of a teen's gender identity or sexual orientation. How families and communities respond to teens' evolving identities can have profound impacts on whether teens feel secure or alienated. As we see with oxytocin and attachment, the biological and social dimensions of emotion are deeply intertwined. To fully understand how adolescents experience emotions, we need to consider not just the biology of hormones and brain structures, but also how these feelings are processed and interpreted by the mind. This brings us to a key area of research in psychology: theories of emotions. Prevalent emotional theories focus on the order and mechanism of how emotions are experienced and interpreted. Each one asks, when something happens, like hearing a loud noise, what's the order of events that leads you to feeling afraid, excited, or joyful? There are typical features that these theories examine. The stimulus, something happens in the environment like a sudden noise or a comforting smile. The body's reaction, your heart racing, your palms are sweaty, or your body prepares for action. The mind's interpretation, your brain tries to make sense of these physical changes and the situation. And the emotional experience, how you label the feeling as either joy, fear, or sadness. Each of these theories differs mainly on the order of events. Some say the body reacts first. Some say the mind and body react together. And others say it depends on how we interpret what's happening at the moment. By understanding these theories, we'll see how emotions don't just happen. They're constructed from a dynamic dance between mind and body, influenced by culture and personal experience. This is especially important for adolescents whose brains and social worlds are in flux. The James Lange theory says that the body reacts first, and then the mind labels that reaction as an emotion. For example, imagine you're walking through the woods and you see a bear. First, your body reacts. Your heart races, your palms sweat. Then your brain interprets those signals and says, "Oh, I'm scared." In other words, the physical response comes before the emotional feeling. The Cannon-Bard theory takes a different view. It argues that physiological arousal and emotional experience happens at the same time, simultaneously. So, in that same bear in the woods example, your heart starts pounding at the same moment you feel afraid. The body's reaction and the emotional experience are in parallel. They happen together and not in a sequence, not one and then the other. The Shasta and Singer's two-factor theory of emotion suggests that emotions are the result of two key processes. The first factor is the physiological arousal, how strongly your body reacts to a situation. This sets the intensity of the emotion. The second factor is the cognitive appraisal, how you interpret or label what's happening. This shapes the type of emotion you feel. So, in the situation with the bear, you see a bear, your heart starts to race. That's the physiological arousal. But then your brain kicks in, you realize this is dangerous, and you label this as fear. That label, your cognitive appraisal, turns the physical reaction into a specific emotion. So in this theory, the two factors are, 1, the body's physiological response, and 2, how we think about or explain this response. This is different in that it means that emotions aren't automatic. They're shaped on how we interpret what is happening to us. Once the mind and body have worked together to generate an emotional experience, that emotion doesn't stay locked inside. It gets expressed outwardly, often in ways that are recognizable across cultures. Paul Ekman's work on facial expressions gives us insight on how some emotional signals, like smiles or frowns, are nearly universal, showing how biology and culture come together. Paul Ekman studied how facial expressions for basic emotions are recognized across cultures, like smiles or frowns. His work shows that while cultures shape how we express emotion, some emotional signals are universal. But while Ekman's findings are influential, they're not without critique. Some researchers argue that emotional expressions are not entirely universal, and that cultural norms can shape when and how people show emotions. For example, some cultures encourage more emotional restraint, while others value open emotional expression. So while the capacity for expression can be universal, the display rules, when and how those expressions are shown, can vary widely. Let's look at some diversity scenarios through the lens of emotional theory. In this first scenario, a boy in class feels his heart racing as he's about to share feelings about a poem. According to the James Lang theory, he first notices his body's reaction, the heart racing, and he labels this as anxiety because he's been taught that boys showing vulnerability is not masculine. Social norms about masculinity can influence how boys interpret their physical cues, turning excitement or engagement into fear of judgment. Teachers can validate emotional experiences by helping reframe bodily signals not as weaknesses, but as part of honest expression and curiosity. For an LGBTQ+ youth, emotional challenges can be magnified by worries about acceptance or rejection, making them especially sensitive to these emotional highs and lows. In this example, a queer student's heart starts pounding when they're about to come out to a supportive teacher. According to the Shasta-Singer theory, they experience both the body's arousal and the context, understanding they feel nervous because they care deeply about how they're seen. Their interpretation of a pounding heart as hopeful versus terrified depends on social context. Will the teacher affirm them or shut them down? Educators can reduce fear and reframe that emotion by affirming that the classroom is a safe space. In this third scenario, a transgender teen is confronted by misgendering in a class. According to the Cannon-Bard theory, they simultaneously feel the emotion of anger and the physiological arousal, tight chest and flushed face. There's no waiting for the body first or thought first response. It all hits at once. While gender identity and emotional safety are threatened, Cannon-Bard's simultaneous surge of emotion and body reaction can be overwhelming. Teachers can help by calming the environment and providing space for recovery, validating the students' feelings without forcing them to explain or justify. These scenarios remind us as educators that even basic body responses are interpreted and experienced within cultural, gendered, and social frameworks. Educators can create supportive environments by recognizing that emotional responses are shaped by both internal states and external expectations and norms, especially for marginalized adolescents. Thanks for joining me today. In this session, we explored how emotions shape the adolescent experience, how they're driven by brain development, the amygdala, and the HPA axis, and how dopamine can amplify them. We also looked at how emotions can both enhance and interfere with learning, especially when social identity and stigma create additional challenges. We explored theories of motivation from evolutionary insights to the James Lange, Cannon-Bard, and Shasta-Singer models, and considered how attachment and cultural contexts further shape emotional experiences. Finally, we looked at how race, gender, sexuality, and culture influences how emotions are expressed, regulated, and supported in adolescence. By recognizing these factors, educators can create more inclusive, empathetic environments that honor every adolescent's emotional world. Thank you for taking the time to explore with me how psychological theory and diversity influence adolescent development. If you're in the course, make sure to check the syllabus and weekly announcements for updates and assignments. If you're just visiting, thank you for stopping by. I hope you'll check out other videos in this playlist or elsewhere on the Stats with Torah's YouTube channel. Wishing you the best in your educational pursuits. Until next time, ciao!